and welcome to the Irocknits podcast, episode 16. I'm back, finally. I'm a week late. Not too bad. I have lots of stories to tell, and there are reasons. One of the reasons that things got crazy around here, and then I found out that Mercury was in retrograde, and we had the full moon, and one other thing. So I've had a crazy 2 weeks, which became 3 weeks. I needed to shift the podcast. I used to always podcast on Mondays and then edit and put it up late at night so that it would be there on Tuesdays. That was always my original intention. And then suddenly the Mondays got off. So there was an extra Monday. And so I was on my every other Monday when I go to book club and my every other Monday when we have a housekeeper come and do some of the scrubbing that I can't do on my knees. When this opportunity presented itself for me to shift 1 week back, I kind of just had to take it and run with it, and I'll tell you all about it. I have new eyeglasses. What, you say? They look like this, just like the same eyeglasses I had before? Well, they are. So I'm going to start today with Cori's stories. I have been traveling with my daughter and my husband, and when we were gone in Iowa, I was in Des Moines and Iowa City, the husband was home, our kitchen flooded. And it did not do too much damage. I mean, some damage, more than none, but it didn't flood the house, and it could have. There is a vent underneath our kitchen sink, and the water flowed down under the sink into the basement, which is unfinished, and just got the insulation wet, and my husband could use the wet back down there. It did wreck the hardwood floors in front of the kitchen sink, but he called us in Des Moines and said, I've been mopping up water in the house for 4 hours this morning, trying to get it cleaned up. And so we had to, he fixed it. It was a valve leak underneath the sink, so where the water comes into the underneath of the sink. So then the next day we got a flat tire. We got a nail in my snow tires in Minnesota. Some cars run better with snow tires in the winter, and so we have snow tires and summer tires. And there was a nail in the, I don't know, sidewall or something. And so we couldn't just purchase one tire because you can't put one new tire on with 3 old tires. There's something gimmicky about that. Some of you know, have tire people, so I'll be nice. But I think we could have put one. But anyway, husband says no. He's the car guy. So we had to buy 4 new winter tires. So flood Saturday, 4 new winter tires on Sunday. And then we just had our summer tires put on because we were already there and it's the end of winter. So now we have 4 new winter tires in our basement. And then on Tuesday, I broke my eyeglasses right here. And I love these eyeglasses, not just for their color and their shape, but they have springs in them. So they're super nice. So, you know, they don't bend out of shape like other eyeglasses, and they sit farther away from my eyes than my previous pair. So I was really sad. But the worst part of it is how I broke my eyeglasses. I was going to the dog park, as I do in the morning, and the plumber had come. Different issue, bathroom shower, not enough hot water. That's been going on for years, literally. And he was running late because he left his iPhone at home, so he had to go home and get it. And so then I left late for the dog park. And I usually go first thing in the morning. But the neighbor kids were playing basketball in their driveway because our snow is pretty much gone, and they play basketball from morning till night. There are 4 small children in that family. I am not judging that mother for saying go outside and don't come in till it's dark, which is what she does. But they have a hockey rink in their backyard that the dad puts up in the winter, so they're out there, and then they play basketball, and they get along, and all the neighborhood kids are there, but they were playing basketball, and the school bus came. And so they went running to the school bus to get on the bus, and they left their basketballs in the driveway. And this happens a lot. We leave our toys in the driveway, and then they become toys in the street. So I'm loading the dog, and I notice that the basketball is rolling down the street, and I think, I I'm gonna hit that basketball, or somebody's gonna hit that basketball. And we're at the start of a cul-de-sac. At the end, 1, 2, 3 houses down is a cul-de-sac. So I thought to myself, I should go get that basketball, right? And that mom doesn't need to yell at those kids one more time about leaving stuff in the street, and I can go do it. So I backed down the driveway and went down. Sure enough, it rolled all the way to the cul-de-sac. And I got out of my car, got the basketball, put it in my lap, and drove back up the street right here. And I pulled over to their side of the street. And there was still a pretty significant snowbank on the corner where they had shoveled high the snow. And one of the basketballs was laying in the yard on the other side of that snowbank. And I thought, oh, I just need to put this other basketball by the first one. So I took the ball and I turned in my car, and the window was down, and I threw the ball out the window, and it ricocheted off the top of the driver's side or passenger side window and hit me right in the face and broke my very expensive eyeglasses. I just cried. I just sat in the street and just tears came because we'd had so much. None of it that wasn't fixable, none of it that we couldn't, afford, insurance, but I didn't know if I could get my glasses, and I should have hit the basketball, right? It would have cost me $14.99 to replace that sucker. But instead I had to pay $480 some for a new frame, so I called the lady right away where I'd gotten them. They're probably 2 years old. Year old, but I had a eye doctor appointment the week before, and so I knew that my eyes had not changed significantly, and so I called her, and she said, we don't have them in stock anymore, but I'll see if I can get them for you, because my glasses are fine. There's nothing wrong with them, and I didn't need a upgrade. They hadn't gotten any worse, so they could just put these in the new frames if they could get them, and there's no fix on this because it just split perfectly flat right there. So yeah, you could super glue it, but it's going to break forever, and you could put white tape around it and be a nerd. But so she called me and said she could get them back in, and so then I had to wear my purple glasses for 6 days. And my purple glasses are fine. They're a backup pair, and they just sit closer to my eyes, and so I'm just not used to them, so they feel uncomfortable in my face, but there's nothing wrong with them. So yeah, the plumber came back and fixed the shower. We now have long-term hot water, and it doesn't take 20 minutes to get to the faucet. The contractor came to look at the hardwood floors. They're going to let them dry out for a few more days and see how far the damage goes. We got the 4 new tires, and my glasses came in Friday night. So the moon is hopefully out of retrograde. I've heard that before, but I didn't know it made bad things happen to good people. Right? I was just being nice. I was being a nice neighbor. I didn't yell at the kids. I don't usually yell. I don't yell at the kids, but I was just being nice. I haven't touched a basketball since I was in 7th grade. So sue me for not being able to throw it out the passenger side. I mean, it had to go like this far. Anyway, I have some hellos today. Let's get into this. People who have reached out to me that normally reach out to me in the comments, I'm just going to say quickly: Andi, Emma, Peggy, Prudence, Kathy, Mel, and Angela. Hi, you guys. And people who I think have been new commenters: Knitting with Quills, Wit Adder 1, Christy Campbell, Rachel Weissenstein, Debbie Frenia, and Suzanne Selby. Suzanne said, Cori, you use the word tszuj perfectly, and she knows when it's coming. But she knew how to spell it. Remember, I always talk about zhuzhing up my sleeves or zhuzhing something up. Tszuj. Who would have thought, right? I went out to look it up, and I found this article, How to Zhuzh Up Your Vocabulary. And they have it in quotes because they don't know how to spell it either, which is kind of funny. But apparently, Carson from the Queer Eye television show made it more famous, the word zhuzh. And it can be spelled a number of ways because it really is more of an urban word, urban dictionary word than a traditional. But it does come from the Yiddish. and it means to finesse, tweak, rearrange, or make better. And I just spent the last hour doing that. Finessing, tweaking, rearranging, and making better to get all my stuff prepared for this podcast. So there you go. Here are my notes. Can you see how it's spelled? tszuj. Thanks, Suzanne. I wouldn't have ever thought to kind of look it up. I use it and then I possibly forget that I'm needing to use it. Okay, so let me explain why the podcast is late and why I chose to do that. My daughter Kylie is graduating from Grinnell College in Iowa this spring, small private liberal arts kind of nerd school. She probably hates it if I say that, but you kind of have to like to study and want to be a good student, I think. And going to liberal arts schools, most kids know that they're going to go on. And Kylie has decided to go on to law school. And so she's been working with a mentor and applying to colleges. And she chose 11 or 13 schools to apply to. Her mentor helped her figure out schools that would be a good fit for her. And then she's gotten quite a few acceptance letters and a number of full ride scholarships. So we're super fortunate, but we need to go visit. So a week ago, Thursday, I went to Des Moines, and then on Friday, we visited Drake, where Kylie had a scholarship, and she took a class, and we took a tour, and she met with the admissions dean, and then we drove across the state. We went to Iowa City, and on Saturday, they had an Accept Students Day, and so we took a tour and sat in on some informational portions of the day, and then we came home, and then Monday, she interviewed at the Mitchell Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul for a fellowship, kind of a leadership fellowship, and she was offered that, so that is one of her top choices right now. And then we went to New York as a family because we lived on the East Coast and we like to go to New York City and see some shows, and Kylie wanted to show her boyfriend Stevie New York. He'd never been, and so we said, yeah, that would be really fun. Let's go for kind of a long weekend right here in the, in your spring break. And we were in a taxi on Friday night, all four of us going to dinner, and Loyola University in Chicago called, and they wanted her to come for her interview at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. And we're not home, and we don't have a plan. So her dad spent Saturday morning trying to figure out how to get her to, she was coming home on Sunday and we were coming home on Monday, and she said, I'm perfectly capable of going to all these visits by myself, but I would really like someone along to talk to me about them afterwards, to kind of process so I remember things, because the deadlines are fast approaching, April 1st and April 15th. And so I had told her that I would happily go. So we gathered some miles together and purchased some miles. Kylie flew home Sunday, packed up some clothes, flew out Monday. I flew from New York to Chicago instead of home. Ross flew home. I met her. Amber came up. Thank gosh for Amber. Amber came up to the airport, picked me up on Monday, took me to a mall for 2 hours. We sat and knit. Then we went back and picked up Kylie at the airport. Then she took us to Loyola, where she dropped us off at our hotel. And then she went to a different hotel, couldn't find a place to park, finally found a place to park, then Ubered back because she didn't want to give her parking spot, Ubered back to our hotel, which it wasn't super far away, but now it's nighttime. She and I sat up until 12:30, and then Kylie had her interview for this Child and Family Law Fellowship at Loyola on Tuesday morning. That was a $20,000 interview. Wouldn't you be nervous? She was fine. She just went in. I thought that was a lot of pressure, but and then we went and visited Chicago Kent that afternoon, where she also had a scholarship, so that was good that we could kind of look at two schools and one place there. So she's narrowed it down to two, and we have been all over the country. Not all over the Midwest. It's been a whirlwind here of just traveling and trying to figure things out, and where she's going to be and where she wants to be, and what she wants to study, and yeah, so very fortunate and super blessed that she has a number of choices. And so even though it's been crazy, we've kind of been rolling our eyes a little bit. We know how, we're very thankful that we've had the opportunity to be able to go and look at these schools and see what they have to offer her. So that's why I didn't do a podcast last week, because I wasn't home for one thing, and I didn't expect to be in Chicago. And then when we got home, things were crazy. There were suitcases everywhere, and we had the flood, and we'd had the tire, and we'd had the glasses, and I felt like my head was kind of still spinning around, and I just said, you know what, it's just going to work out better if I just put this up next Tuesday. I'll get on a different Tuesday schedule, so every other Tuesday going forward, hopefully, will just work out better. I had really prided myself on the fact that I had been so consistent in 15 episodes and hadn't had to miss, and really had scheduled things pretty well, and then it all went to heck. So anyway, that's my story of why the podcast didn't go up. Okay, next, what audiobook did I finish this week? Distant Hours by Kate Morton. Oh, was it good? 22 hours long. I've listened to it for probably the last 2 weeks. I've listened to Kate Morton before. Someone recommended this. I thought I had listened to it, to be honest. I thought, yeah, I know that book. I've listened to it. And then I read the description on Audible, and I was like, that doesn't sound like the distance hour books that I'm thinking of. So then I decided to download it, because you can always return at Audible. They have a, return policy, which I've used before. You can get all the way through a book and decide you don't like it and return it. Not in the spirit of the program. So we have to talk a little bit about that. I don't think I've told this story before on the podcast. My husband and I, when we first got married, were buying our first car, and we're at the car dealership back in the day, right, because we've been married a long time, 1986, and we were going to finance the car, even though we had the money. We had saved up money for a new car. And so we were sitting in the car salesman's office, which you hate, right? And my husband's negotiating, and they can give first-time buyers a significant reduction if they finance through them. So my husband says, okay, give us the deal, right? We'll finance through you. So we did all the paperwork, and then the next day, my husband went in and paid it off. And the gentleman told him and me that was not in the spirit of the program. There was no penalty for, early payment, and there was nothing in the contract that said you couldn't do that. So we saved the money, and then we didn't finance it, so then we didn't have to pay on it over time. And so I often use that phrase, not in the spirit of the program. And so now my friends have started to pick that up. Amber has used it a number of times when we've been talking. And she's told other people that story that might not be like ethically and morally terrible, but not in the spirit of the program. So, the Irocknits Designs Cal is still going out in my Ravelry group, Irocknits, March through April. So you can still put your finished objects, anything that you have knit that is an Irocknits design, and I'm giving away a $25 gift card to a person. I was out in the group messages this week, kind of looking around. There's audiobook recommendations from people. So if you're an audiobook listener, go out to that thread, because there's some people are leaving really long, in-depth descriptions of books for you, so you can really get a good idea. But CarolynDP is still started knitting after the holiday, the 12 Days of Knitting Mystery Cowl. And she's putting her pictures in the threads all by herself. And I thought, that just makes me so happy that there she is out there just doing her own thing. She's like, I will finish it. I'm going to post my pictures. So I wrote her name on the bottom, because Carolyn, when you get done, if you finish by the end of April, you need to put that in the Irocknits Designs Cal, the knit along that I'm having all year, every 2 months. So if you don't finish until after the end of April, then put it in May and June. That'll be fine too. Okay. I've had a number of people reach out, and so has Amber, about knitting retreats. I write my notes on all these little pieces of paper throughout the week, and then I just stack them up in here. People wanted to know how to find out about knitting retreats. And so I'm going to give you the answer that I've given before, and I don't mean it to sound snarky or anything, but Google it. My daughter says that to me all the time when I'm not paying attention or doing what I, don't know where I should be looking for something. She'll go, Mom, did you Google it? And I always feel a little. But that's how you find out. So there is a knitting retreats thread on Ravelry. You search the groups on Ravelry, and then when you get to the groups, you put retreats in the search engine in the group section. There are 2 pages full of knitting retreats. Years ago, there used to be one site that had a list that I'm going to say was 20 or 30 pages long of knitting retreats. But I can't tell you how to find out about, there's not a good way. If you can go out and sign up on someone's blog or their website for an email, there are a ton that get published that way. As soon as one comes up, the Yarn Harlot does them all over. Church Mouse Tea and Yarns on Bainbridge Island has a really expensive one that someone could pay for me to go to. I'd like to teach at that one. Well, they always get big name teachers, but and then there are small local ones all over. I would think that most yarn stores would be aware. And then there's always the 4 Stitches Midwest each year, Stitches conferences each year. Stitches Midwest, Stitches West, Stitches South, Stitches East, and Stitches United. So that's, and they move a little bit. And then there's the Vogue. So then Vogue has several a year, so you can go to their site and sign up for their newsletter, and that will get you more information about knitting retreats. Leading Men Fiber Arts is having one in September that's full, but you can put your name on the waiting list. The Zombie Knit Apocalypse is in June. That's full, but you can put your name on the waiting list. Sun Valley Fibers has one in Madison in January. She wouldn't have done her signups yet. And some of those are industry-led, right? Like big name people or yarn dyers who are selling their product and they want to get people in with teachers. And then there are others that are not that way. So that's what I would recommend. Go to Ravelry first and look at all the ones that are out there and get your name on lists. And then you can just do a Google search for knitting retreats and tons of them come up. I mean, tons. And you have to click then and read, and you could certainly Google one, knitting retreats for your state if you don't want to travel far. And then Rhinebeck happens every year in October, and Shepherd's Harvest happens in Minnesota every year in May, and the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival happens every year in May. And a lot of states have sheep and wool festivals, and that, they have teachers and all that kind of thing. So the way we found out about Martha's Virginia Beach retreat is that we were friends with Martha, and she comes to another retreat that we go to, and then she was having that one and people were talking about it, and then we asked how you got on the list, and then she asked me to teach. So then that's how we made a connection there. And that one has gotten smaller. She's reduced her numbers. We talked about that slightly, because she's just an individual having a retreat. So that's something you can do too. If you have a way to gather some people, start small. I say, I'm going to have a knitting retreat at this bed and breakfast for 6 women in August, and then the next year make it 12, and then the next year make it 24. And you don't have to hire a teacher, or you can hire a teacher. Hire one teacher. Hire someone you want to hear. Hire me. Anyway, I am going to be teaching in, Racine, Wisconsin, I believe, in the fall, as well as the east side of Michigan. That's the name of the town I'm going to. It's small. It's north and east. Anyway, I'll let you guys know. As I haven't signed contracts for either one of those yet, but we are working out the dates, so I'm pretty sure they're going to be a go. Okay, so that is something to watch out for so far. I'm just mostly setting up my fall dates now. Okay, let's get into the shawl of the week, or the shawl of the podcast, or however you want to do it. The shawl for this time is from this book, Folk Shawls, 25 Knitting Patterns by Cheryl Oberle. There's her name. And I have knit several things from this book. It's an older book. My guess is you could find it at your local library. It's not in print anymore, but you could probably get a used copy somewhere. And I don't think the patterns are for sale individually on Ravelry. I think you have to go to the book to get them. I don't think she's ever, and I wonder why. That's interesting that she now, because this was written in 2000, so Ravelry wasn't a thing, and then she could probably now put these out individually on Ravelry. So here's the pattern page on Ravelry. Aran Pocket Shawl. This is a worsted weight shawl with pockets. And I probably say this every week, but probably one of my most popular shawls that people try on. It is an amazing fit for a shawl. So I'm going to take a look at this and show you what I can show you here. There's the pocket, and there's one on each side. And when you wear it, it comes right, your hands fit right in there when they come out around the back. So this is a rectangular piece. It has this crosshatch motif, which is just knits and purls. So that's seed stitch in the squares and then knit stitches here. And it just goes over and under all the way. I wore this a lot when I was teaching because I could put it over my shoulders and keep warm, and then put things in my pocket like my keys or pencil. So I've had it for a number of years, but I'm going to try to show you the elastic. There you go. It hugs your shoulders. There's a weight to it. It's worsted weight. It's not heavy. It's just structured so well that it fits your shoulders so nicely. And when people, I often will go around and put it on people in my class. I'll say, you have to feel this around your shoulders to understand what the qualities of this shawl are. So if you have, I think it's about 1,400 yards. So let me see, that's 7 skeins of worsted weight. I don't think I use that much. That seems like too many. 16 stitches and 24 rows to 4 inches, so it works up really quick, 4 stitches to 1 inch. It calls for black water, Abby. Anyway, I love it. It's a rectangle the whole way, just all the way across. Still got a tag on it from when I have it in class. I have everything labeled with tags. And I wrapped it around the neck of this to make it stay on, but it really goes up like this. Okay? Does that make sense? It's just a great shawl, especially for winter, fall and winter. So, you know, plan it now, cast it on in, I don't know, summer, August, something, and then knit it into the fall so that you can start to wear it. Get it cast on now, right? We always have the best of intentions about that, and then we don't always get it right. Okay, what am I wearing today? This is the Friendship Road long-sleeved version of this sweater. It's a new sample, and it's a size bigger than me. I wanted a larger sample size for the ability for more people to try it on. So it's a little roomy, but I don't mind that too much. I have told this story before, but you start your journey, you get in your car and you drive to your friend's house, and then you put her in the car with you, and then the two of you go off on the Friendship Road together to the yarn store or the knitting retreat. It is a top-down raglan with short rows at the neckline, so your first 12 to 14 rows are not knit in the round. You're going back and forth, and then you join in the round, and that makes the neckline sit down just a little bit so it's not right up snug. Then you divide for the sleeves, so you can make the sleeves any length you want. The side seams have a faux slip stitch rib, so it looks like a seam, but it's not. I made this one a split bottomed tunic. I couldn't decide how long to make it, so I left it, we left it unfinished on the bottom until I used up all the yarn. That was my plan. So I made the sleeves first, and then went back and picked up the bottom, and I just did a little split bottom, and I made the back longer than the front. And it's super comfy. I did it in Sun Valley Fibers DK. It's a DK weight sweater. It was originally knit in cotton, but you can knit it in wool or whatever you want that's DK. Works out just fine. It's a pretty simple pattern. I think I could recommend it for a first pattern for people because it's a, you know, line by line kind of pattern from the book, Minnesota 52. So that's what I'm wearing today. Yeah, it's comfortable. And it's going to be a sample going forward. Then I have to change the mannequins. So we're going to take a little break and I'll be right back. I'm back. I wasn't going to say anything, but I keep glancing out the window, which I've done since I first started podcasting. It started snowing. And I kind of thought it was, and so it's been distracting me because we're just, I think, getting a little flurry here in Minnesota. Last day of March. March goes in like a lion, out like a lamb, right? It's not going to be a lamb, even though we love sheep. Okay, the sweaters of the week. This week, I have all kinds of sweaters to show you in this category. So we're going to be talking about Dale sweaters, Dala, Dale garn, Dala garn, depending on if you have a accent or not. Here is one of the books, D-A-L-E-G-A-R-N. That is, and I have knit a number of these. So let's start with my winter one, okay? This is my true kind of Scandinavian ski sweater, dropped shoulders. I took a class to knit this many, many, many years ago. And because I used a woolly wool, there's no pilling. There's no stretching out of shape. There's no, it almost looks like brand new. Like I've never worn it. And I have worn it and worn it. I really have. Not as often in the last few years. I'm not as big a fan of the dropped shoulder. And now, knowing what I know, I would have notched this in and put the shoulder seam in here a little bit. But that's not how this particular sweater was made. So you have a folded hem. It's not the right word, but you knit up further. You do a purl row, you knit up further, and then you fold it and then tack it down. And the same thing occurs on the underarm. You knit farther than you were supposed to knit. And then when you cut, when you steek it, you have no exposed seams. And then you also include a name. So Cori, 2001. Yeah, 2001 I knit this, I took this class. So it's old, it's an old sweater. But that's a technique that we learned in the class and something that I really wanted to learn. So I often have people say, I don't know what a steek is. A steek is when you cut your sweater. So you can knit this entire thing in the round in a tube all the way up to the top. And then you take a piece of yarn, usually cotton, and you run it down to how deep your sleeve is going to be on both sides, and then you sew or crochet, and then you cut in between there, and then you seam this in and 3 needle bind off your shoulders. But I love colorwork knitting, and I love learning all these new techniques. So in Scandinavian true knitting, this little motif, those are called lice, L-I-C-E, and not the kind of lice that we think of is, but that dotted texture pattern. And then this particular sweater does not have the color work on the yoke. It has it on the bottom of the sleeves and on at the waistband. I don't know if I chose this particular one because I didn't want to do yoke steeking, or if it's just because I particularly liked the construction method of it. So there is the first, and this one's done in wool. Just throw that over there. And then I own two Dale sweaters that I got on vacation. So if you get a Dale sweater, you get this little patch. Someone can tell me, but I think it's pronounced Dala, but because, you know, it's just easier to say Dale, you all know what I'm talking about. And I don't know how to, I'll probably mispronounce it. So I do own this one, and this is, I always leave this sweater on this hanger because this is a way to store your hand knit sweaters. If you don't have a lot of folding space, like let's say you don't have drawer space or you don't have shelving space in your closet, this is a way to fold your sweater over a hanger so that you don't get those little arm divots, but you can actually hang it up and it's protected. So this is the body, and these are the two sleeves. You lay it flat on your bed, fold it in half over, and then you pull these through. So this would come through here, like that. It's just over the hanger. There are like tutorials on Pinterest for this. There's a picture, so if you can't stop your camera and figure out how to do it, or your phone or whatever you're watching on your television, that's a good way to do it. And then it just tucks in here, stays really nice, nothing gets stretched out. So this is my purchased one, but I take it to class like that because it's a good way to show people how they can carry or store their sweaters on hangers, even if you have a closet elsewhere in your house, and that it'd be better to hang it for you. I don't usually recommend hanging sweaters, but this doesn't get out of shape at all. Okay, now let's go into these two these two special snowflakes here. This is the Poppy, I think it's called, sweater, and this one is a man's sweater from the cover of a Dale book. So I knit these both in cotton, Classic Elite Provence Egyptian cotton, my favorite yarn, one of my favorite cottons. It's a mercerized cotton, and I got some in Arizona when I went on my trip in January, so I've talked about it on the podcast, and I showed some of that yarn because it is still available in some yard stores, even though it has been discontinued. I love it because of the color palette, obviously, right? Like, I really love the color palette of the bright. It's hard sometimes to find brights in cottons, and this particular one was knit in the round and then steeked and then picked up, and I did a folded over picot edge. So I think I knit like 4 rows, then I did yarn over knit 2 together, yarn over knit 2 together, yarn all the way, and then knit 4 more rows. And then when you fold the yarn over knit 2 together, right on that line, you get this little picot edge. Gosh, can you guys see that? Here, I'll pull it like this. There, see how that's jagged along there? It's black, so kind of hard to see, but maybe I'll take it off and hold it up closer in a minute. So I just put a little loop and thread. The reason that I like this design so well, and if you're going to do a colorwork sweater for the first time and you're not experienced with working color work, oftentimes your color work is going to be tighter than your stockinette. And because it happens, the color work starts here, when it pulls in, it makes a natural shaping waistline. So this is all solid all the way down to here. And then when I start my color work, if it is tighter, which it has a tendency to be tighter on cotton, because there's not a lot of give to it, so you do have to knit it sometimes on a bigger needle than you would normally knit it on. you just get a really nice shape. So over a little black dress, this one looks great. So you have it on the bottom of the sleeves. There's a little triangle motif here of seed stitch right along the sleeve, and then some striping, and then it goes into the color work. And there's my back side. So I really like this one a lot because it's kind of a classic shape. It's almost like a button-up jacket. A little piece of fuzz on here. And then this one over here, this mannequin broke this weekend, and my husband had to get a special screw, so he's just gonna lean on her. We all know that this is my male mannequin, right, that I got on clearance. Flat-chested and big, a little wider shouldered, so it's a little tight on here. He's just gonna lean today because I asked Ross if he could get it, help me screw it in, and he says we don't have a big enough screw at the bottom of the base where the wood thing is, and so it's been stripped, and so we're gonna have to pick up a bigger one. So this one was a men's sweater on the cover of a Dale magazine book, and that's what I'm going to tell you here is that a lot of Dale pattern books are in the back of yarn stores. They've gone to the clearance room to dye. It's a great place to pick up for 50 cents or $1 some pattern books that have some motifs in them that you can then use, because we're just so digital now that we're not really, using those books, and so the yarn stores aren't selling them, and so a lot of them are just back in, and they're wonderful patterns. So this one was done in some similar colors, but not quite these colors, because it was for a man. If I remember right, I think there was more dark green in it than the lime green, and I just loved that I was going to have this kind of fiesta sweater when I got all done. It was really fun to knit. It's got a seed stitch. It was steeped, and then after the seed stitch band was picked up, I covered up those the raw edges with a bias tape here, and the bias tape has a blue stitch pattern in it. Let me see if I can get this off mannequin. See? So the bias tape runs all along there and covers up all the raw edges of that. So the armholes were steeped in place. We cut down that tube and around. So although both of these sweaters feel a little like they came out of the 80s or the 90s, I still wear them. I don't care. I love having this bright cotton sweaters in the summertime. You always grab a sweater as you go out the back door to go to a movie or go out to dinner because it's air conditioned, and so I just love having these really bright sweaters, and they were super fun to knit. So there you go. We have 1 wool, 2 cotton, and then a way to hang it. I was digging in the closet today to find the Dale items, and all of the information about Dale sweaters. They have an entire website, so feel free to go out to their website. They produce ski sweaters every year. You can purchase them already made and knit up. They're quite expensive. I've had both of mine for 25 years when I got them for a lot less than they are now. But a really nice thing to have in your wardrobe and your closet. And if you're checking things off your little bucket list on what I need to knit and things I need to experience in my life, I think knitting a Dale sweater is probably right up there for everybody. So there you go. I have some more questions to answer this week. Somebody sent me this great heads up. Do you remember when we were talking 2 podcasts ago or 3 about the woman whose Sweater buttons were too big, so she had to sew them back on her sweater every time she wanted to launder her sweater. And we were trying to give her ideas for what to do. So here's an idea. These are button pins. And can you see that picture up there? The pin has a hump in it, and the hump goes through a shank button and holds the button in place. So if the woman, and I don't have it here, who had buttons that were too big, if they were shank buttons, I went and purchased some. I got them on Amazon. They are Dritz. I got 10 in this package, and it's a safety pin, coilless, with a hump in it that will hold a button in place for you if you need to take buttons off and on of something. So there you go. Thank you to the person who pointed that out to me. I appreciate it. Then we had a conversation about wool wash. Remember? Woolite. Oh man, did I go down a path on that one. So I made the comment that I had heard that Woolite wasn't good, and then I came back later, and someone told me that Woolite is a detergent, and so it is hard on your fibers, just like using a detergent on your hair would be harder on your hair. Can you use it? Yes. Would it clean? Yes. Do you want to use it? Perhaps not. But if you have not followed Kristine Kelly of the Ewe University podcast, you probably should. She did a entire podcast called Battle of the Wool Washes in January 16th of 2017. And several people pointed me in this direction. And I've listened to Kristine, and then she became a video podcaster, and she's a professor in Illinois, pretty sure. And I have met her at a Stitches event, and she's super knowledgeable. But more than that, she's a researcher. So she spends time looking up things for us and then telling us all about it. So go out and watch. If you're really interested, go out and watch this Battle of the Wool Washes. There was also a woman on YouTube who did a wool wash tutorial on how to make your own detergent and what you should or should not be using. And she's a knitting podcaster. I will try to put that in the show notes or on this eruption my mother-in-law called. So I found the information on the wool wash woman. Her podcast is called Dunkel Grun, and she's out of Switzerland. So it's Dunkel Grun, and she did 2 podcasts on wool wash. One is called Fiber Science 1, and one is called Fiber Science 2. And she deals with wool wash, conditioners. She talked about crocking, homemade wool wash that she makes from ivy leaves. And I watched both of her podcasts, and she said we should not be using any solid soaps whatsoever. I don't use solid soap, but I know a lot of people who do. The bars of soap to do their wool wash. And she said that in order to make that solid, there's a chemical you use. So I'm going to step off this platform because I don't know enough, but go out and watch the Dunkel Grun podcast and get some information about it because I found it fascinating. Okay? We have a woman in our knitting community who could use our help. Sheila Duong, formerly of the Knit One Heart Two podcast, which I watched for years, her son has had significant medical issues almost from birth, and they have a GoFundMe set up right now. He had a transplant, and the transplant failed. He had a second transplant. That's doing fine. The drugs that they had to use to treat it have now caused or given him cancer. I mean, it's just, if you have $5, go out to the GoFundMe for Zachary Duong. Duong. And it's a picture of their whole family, Sheila and her son in a chair, and then her older son and her husband in the picture, and give them $5. Or whatever, because she's had to quit her job to stay at the hospital with him. And when I was watching the podcast, she was spending time going to school to become a phlebotomist and to get a better job and to support the family, to help with some of this. And I just feel like sometimes in our community, we don't always pay attention to those closer to us, and Sheila's not asking. Her friends of theirs set this up, and they're not trying to raise a huge amount of money, just a little, right? And you can go out and do a little good instead of buying a pattern this week or a cup of coffee or something. Maybe we should give it to Sheila. I wrote it down and just felt like I needed to ask everyone. Or, you know what? Maybe you don't have an extra little bit of money. Maybe you could just pray. Maybe that would be helpful for them. Okay. Then someone this week, where was I? I was at Knitting Group. No, I was at the yarn store. And we were talking about how much yarn, how do you know how much yarn you need to finish a row? And I said that I will oftentimes take a piece of the yarn from where it's attached to my needle and count out 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, 4, and then I will put a slip knot at the end of the 5th yard, and then I will set that down, and then I will knit around my sweater, say, and I get all the way around and I haven't come to the slip knot yet. So then I go around again, and then I get to the slip knot right before the end. I know that it's going to take me 5 yards to go around my sweater twice. So then I can, when I get closer to the end of my yarn, I can count out 5 or 10 yards, and I can know that that's how much it's going to take up. Not super scientific, but it works for me. I've used it for years that way. You can usually plan on using twice the yarn to bind off, so you don't want to just leave the minimal amount to bind off with. But if you're looking at a little clump of yarn and you're knitting and knitting and knitting, it never goes down, because that's a thing, right? You just want to finish using the ball, and you knit and knit and knit and knit. Instead of getting 1 inch, you get 4 more inches because the ball doesn't ever get any smaller. This is the second way to know whether or not you're going to run out of yarn, and that's to use a scale. So this is a little kitchen or beading or drug scale, and it does grams and ounces, and it fits in my little project bag. I have a little clear, and it sits in the back of there, so I can carry it with me if I choose to. And I just put my ball of yarn on there, and then I knit 2 rounds, and then I look and I say, oh, it took me 2 grams of yarn to knit that far. So now I know how much yarn I have left because I have this many grams. So it's super handy. Several of us at Knitting Group usually have one in our purse, because someone will say, does anyone have a scale? And it saves you going to the post office and weighing something, which I have done. Actually gone up and asked my post mistress if she would weigh something, tell me how much I had left. But I'm going to say, if you're going to go out and buy one and you don't want it to be portable, like you're okay with leaving it at home, then I think I would go get this one instead. This one was $9 more, I think, or $8 more. And you see how it has the bowl on the top? When you are entering knit-alongs, sometimes you have to mark down your yardage, and they're going to add up your yardage, or they're going to choose the person who uses the most yardage, or you want to know how much yardage you used, and you have to figure that out. You have to calculate that. You need to weigh your entire piece. Your entire piece does not fit on this. You cannot roll up a sweater and lay it on here. and weigh it, because it falls off, and you know, even if you stack it up this way, it just doesn't work. So I have a little bit bigger scale for those types of things. This one, anything you put in the bowl, right? So you could put a sweater in the bowl, because it's going to, you're going to be able to tare it, T-A-R-E, right? And get it to 0 with the bowl on there, so you know how much the bowl weighs, and then you'd be able to weigh anything going forward. And I'm assuming that it also works with the bowl not on it. So if you had just a small hat, you just wanted to lay it on the scale, you could do it. So instead of investing in the small one and then also having a bigger one, which my small one cost, I think, $9 when I bought it. There might be 12 now. And my big one cost $12 when I bought it. So cost-wise, it's not extremely prohibitive. But, you know, we're always buying new needles, right? And stitch gauges and stitch markers, and we're losing stitch markers, so we got to buy more stitch markers. I mean, it just always gets to be something. So I'm just trying to save everybody a little money by saying, if you're going to buy one because you want to weigh your stuff and you want to be able to tell how much yarn you have left, or how much you actually knit out of that skein of yarn, how many yards you might have left of it, to find out whether or not you've got 220 yards on your worsted weight skein, and you knit a hat and it used 90, but you don't know that, and so you need to know if you have, you know, 130 yards left to use for another hat, because you're not sure. I mean, a scale can just come in handy in so many ways, so that's what I would recommend. Also, I found some knitting calculator sites. So I had a person reach out and say, how do I figure out how to increase evenly across a row? And I have an app on my phone for that. I think we've talked about this, but someone just asked. So the app is no longer available. And so you have to go to your computer and put in knitting calculators, and there are a bunch. So I found this one on Good Knit Kisses, and it's got a bunch of knitting calculators on it. So you can put in increases, decreases, number of rows, all that kind of stuff, and it calculates stuff out for you. This one also has to calculate how many stitches to cast on. If you are sizing something and you don't understand the concept, the kind of the Elizabeth Zimmerman concept of making your own, doing your own numbers, and that kind of thing, you can use a knitting calculator online. There are also knittingfool.com. You can put in all your numbers and it will spit the pattern out for you. So if you need a plain top-down raglan sweater pattern, you can't find one, and you can't find one that maybe the sizes are 40, 44 and you wanted a 42, there are calculators out there on the computer. Some of them you have to pay for, like a pattern. There's a new gal who's doing a ton of them, and she is charging $6 or something for the generator to make, and you put in what gauge you're going to knit it at, what yarn you're using, and then your sizes, and then it will spit out a plain, you know, sometimes they'll have different necklines. They'll have a crew neck, a V-neck, and a scoop neck. Sometimes they won't. But it will give you, so there are all kinds of calculators kind of out on the internet for you to use for that kind of stuff, so that you don't have to work so hard to try to do the math yourself. And then there is a new app coming called Fiberly, and it is going to be an app for knitting designers and test knitters and sample knitters. So you will sign up, and then people will post their test knits when the due date is, and then you can apply to test knit or sample knit for that person. There is already an app out there for that called Yarn Pond, which I was unaware of, but I got contacted by the Fiberly people to do my test knits through them, and so I said I would give it a try and just see how it goes, and then someone let me know that there's already a program out there for that. So I've gotten in touch with the Fiberly people and asked them why they're doing a new one or what will be different about theirs than the first one, the Yarn Pond one, but I'd never used either. And sometimes it's hard to find test knitters and sample knitters, and sometimes test knitters and sample knitters don't know how to get a gig because they don't have a close personal relationship with the designer, so they don't know. So I just thought I would share that, Fiberly and Yarn Pond, so you can go out and take a quick look at that. Oh, here's one more knitting calculator for knitting increases. This woman has come across my feed a couple times in the last week, World Knits. She has a book out called Little Man Knits, so if you knit for little boys, you might want to take a look at that book. But here's the calculator. You have 66 stitches, you need to increase 30, and then it calculates and tells you how to do it. Because sometimes a pattern will say increase evenly 20 stitches across the row. And you have to sit there and go, okay, I have this many on, and how many do I have to do in between? And then you have one left over. You get to the end and it doesn't quite work out right. So those calculators will do that for you. So that's World Knits. Okay. I have a quick show and tell on two products that I really like. I don't usually share items that I purchased, but boy, are these interesting. So these look like wrist cuffs, leather wrist cuffs, but they're not. They're shawl cuffs. They're by the Rusted Stitch. I saw that the Naughty Knitwits, Michelle, had posted this on her feed, and she put one on this week, and I had already had mine, but I didn't podcast last week, so I didn't get a chance to show everyone. Stephanie is in Iowa, and she owns the Rusted Stitch. I got a really cute felted gnome from her at Christmas time, but I grabbed my Fiber Friends shawl, which it was the Fiber Fest weekend this weekend, so lots of people were wearing the shawl, and so you just strap this around like this, any way, shape or form that you want, and you just tuck that through there, and you can tie it in a knot. You can put it up around, all the way around up here. I'm using the screen to do this. I should have gone in. But yeah, it keeps it in place and holds it on. It's not going to fall off. You're not going to lose it. People often tell me at my shawl class that they don't know how to style the shawls that they're knitting, so they knit them but they don't wear them. So I have lots of tips and tricks about how to wear different shawls. But yeah, I thought this was really cool. I bought a brown one and a black one. I thought that was a good way to go, and then I'm going to use these in my class to show people how to close their shawls. And then I purchased some of these from Brick Bubble, and these are shawl pins. And they've got the screw. So these are just like the jewel closures, but they have really interesting designs on them. So you stick your shawl pin on there, you unscrew it like a screw, and then you can take it off and on, and then it won't move. You just stick it in there. Isn't that cool? And I got these from Brick Bubble. So this is kind of a rusty orange one. It's really more brown, and then I got a dark brown one. And they have tons of different ways. So I will add these to my ways to wear a shawl class and put those out there. So I thought that was kind of fun. All right, we have one more question. Someone somewhere, I tried to find it before I started podcasting, asked me about, could I talk a little bit about holes on the underarms of sweaters? and it was Mimi of 3 Knits who asked me that, but I couldn't find where she asked me, so I don't know if it was on Ravelry or Instagram or where she asked me, but or under the comments. I often get questions right in the comments of the YouTube, but there are a couple of different ways that you can get rid of holes on the underarms of sweaters, and it's all about what construction method you're using for why the holes present themselves. So if you're doing a bottom up sweater and you are adding the sleeves and then you're joining it all around and going up from here up in the yoke, you'll get holes on the front and the back oftentimes, depending on how you join that in the round. And then if you're doing a top down sweater and then you're putting the sleeve on waste yarn and just holding it there and then finishing the body and coming back and picking that up, you'll get holes for that. And I have a couple of techniques that I would show or teach someone how to close those up. A lot of times it has to do with picking up a stitch and then changing the way the stitch is mounted, or knitting through the back loop to tighten it up, to take one of the holes away, knitting 2 together when you come around. So you pick up more than it tells you to pick. You pick up in every little spot you can. So you might pick up 3 in the hole and then 8 across the underarm and then 3 in the other side, but you're really only supposed to have 1 or 2, and then you knit those together on your next round so that you get down to the right number of stitches that you're supposed to have. But I found 2 really good tutorials out there on fixing top-down raglan. So I just thought I would share those. One is called Begin Sleeves and Pick Up at Underarm of Top Down, long title, by Deb Jemmy 2, and one is Avoiding Holes at Underarms, Suzanne Bryan. And I looked those up the other day. Those are 2, yeah, that's going to be impossible to read because I wrote in cursive and pencil. But those are 2. I will put them in the show notes. I will make links to YouTube for them if you are specifically looking for a 3-minute video on how to fix holes in top-down raglan. Mimi of 3 Knits, if you are looking for bottom-up hole pickup suggestions, I would assume that they would have that on YouTube, but if you can't find it, let me know, and I will find a video for you, or we can get in touch and I can tell you how I might fix a bottom-up sweater situation to get rid of those holes. Sometimes it's just a matter of closing the hole after the whole thing is done. I've done that a number of times. You have a hole, you pick up all the way around the hole and you cinch it up like the top of a hat. You know, you just go into the stitches all the way around and cinch it. Sometimes you go back and forth and you mattress stitch it. Sometimes you go halfway around it and then pull that toward the underarm. It also would have to do with whether or not you have enough ease under your arm. So if you're big busted and there's a big hole, and when you put it on, the hole gets bigger, that's going to be a major stress point. So then you're going to want to do a really good job of closing that hole so that that stress point doesn't, you know, pull or stretch. I have found recently that it's probably better to pick up more stitches under the arm, or cast on more stitches under the arm, or include more stitches under the arm than was originally kind of thought or necessary, and then decrease them away. That, for me, that will help. If a pattern says to do 10, I might do 12, you know, pick up 12 or cast on 12 and then decrease them away, because then I'm gathering that at that point away. So I hope that helps. Sometimes I don't have all the information I need to specifically help you, so come to, you know, just personal message me on Ravelry, or put it in the show notes for this, and I'll go out and try to answer a little bit better for you. Okay, here's another thing I printed out for all of you this week. Do you know about this? Knitting graph paper. You want to graph something out yourself, or you just want to chart out the increases or the decreases and see how they're going to look. So a pattern is written out in sentence form, but there's no chart, and they're doing the increases or the decreases every 3rd row, and you want to just chart it out on a piece of graph paper. You can go out and print your own knitting graph paper. Yeah, I just Googled this. I use the knitting site all the time. I'm currently working on a project for the Zombie Knit Apocalypse. I'm going to do a kit collaboration with Jeanette of Sun Valley Fibers and Java Jenny of Kitchen Counter Crafter, and she will have a shawl, a bag, and a skein of yarn with a mini skein at the ZK event. You can purchase it. It will be available, and then I'm assuming that they'll deliver them at the event, and then there will be more available after the fact. But I needed to chart. I needed to work out some increases on a triangle. The triangle wasn't growing evenly. It was growing 1 stitch to the right and 2 stitches to the left. And I couldn't, in my brain, figure out the mathematical equation for how to know where to start that triangle in the center of the row, so that when I went up, it grew more on this side, and I didn't want to hit the side edge. Does that make sense? It's very complicated for me in my brain. Just couldn't quite get it right. And so I needed to draw it out. I just needed to draw it and do my increases and make a triangle, and then be like, okay, now I'm 5 stitches from the right edge and 5 stitches from the left edge, and it worked out just fine. And that particular shawl is a hot mess of a prototype. I just needed to keep knitting to see where it was gonna get to, because I just couldn't visualize in my mind, and I didn't know how much yarn I had, and so I have this kind of prototype. It's a very rough idea of what what the final product will look like, and then I had to just tell Jeanette and Jenny, this is kind of what it's going to look like, and they were very kind in that moment. So now I'm figuring out the triangle and writing the pattern. Anyway, so I also have a new pattern coming out, and I printed it off. So my knitters at the library wanted to make a hat. My printer ink was kind of running low, but this is the Knitting at the Library hat, and it matches the Knitting at the Library cowl, the worsted weight lace cowl. So if the lace cowl is written, it's the part due, and it's written for fingering and for worsted, the cowl. And then I matched the hat and wrote a hat pattern with the same stitch sampler in it. And I think I just got this back from the graphic designer this morning, and it is a checklist pattern. All my patterns are checklist patterns like that. So every row is written out for you, and you check it off in the boxes. It's a really easy way to follow a pattern. It does usually require an extra page or two of printing, because you have to accommodate all the boxes and the areas. So sometimes my patterns seem like they're a little long, but I really like this checklist format, and my graphic designer is willing to lay it out that way and take the extra time to do it. So look for this week. I think it will be out, and because it's a lace hat, it's kind of a fun spring hat, especially if you're a big hat wearer, if you like to wear hats all the time, especially on bad hair days. So I have that. Originally the cowl was done in yellow, and then I just did the hat in yellow to match. Here, I'll show you better. Here we are at the library, and we laid them on the library shelves. So they match. It's a little sampler. So there you go. New pattern. A couple of other new patterns coming out, and I'm starting work on an ebook. So I took a class with Josh Bennett at Vogue Knitting Live in November, and he made us do a whole series of knitwear designs together in one collaboration. And I didn't really have one and didn't think I really wanted to do one, but I came up with an idea, and it's kind of niggling me. So I think I'm gonna kind of go for it there, try to, make that happen. I'm going to leave you all today with a way to store your shawls. So a lot of people say you have so many sweaters and shawls, how do you store everything? And this is how I'm gonna try to do this standing up. This is how I store my shawls. I fold them in half, and then in half again, and then I roll. So I don't have creases in my shawls. They're not all bunched up. They sit on the shelf like this, and I stack them. They fit really well. I can tell where they are. So, you know, even if I just have 4 or 5 right on a shelf, I can tell, and they're not a mess when I take them out or put them away. You know, they're not all bunched up, they're not scrunched up, they're not in a drawer. Even if they were in a drawer, I just think this is a super easy way. So I just fold in half and in half again, usually depending on how long the shawl is. Sometimes I'll tuck the ends in, and then I just roll. And it becomes just a really easy way to store my shawls. I just want to thank everyone who has come over and joined me in this little endeavor. This is coming up on my birthday month, and I am going to try to grow my viewership by my birthday. So I told my husband, I started this gig late in life. We're getting up towards 60, and if I don't do it now, it's not going to happen. So I want to teach. I want to teach on this podcast. I want to interact with more people, and so I'm really going to try to up my numbers on Instagram so that I get the word out, as well as on this podcast. So if you would please subscribe, hit the subscribe button, and also tell a friend. That would be really helpful to me. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on YouTube, so that I can kind of grow my community. That's really what I want to do, is kind of grow a community of knitters who are enjoying what I have to share, but are also interacting with me in a way that feels good and beneficial by asking questions and having conversations. I know that I'm just talking to a camera, but it feels like I'm having a conversation with a lot of you, because you're interacting with me about books and patterns and what would I think about this and that, and I'm really enjoying that piece of this process. And so I've set myself a goal to reach 5,000 subscribers on YouTube and 10,000 subscribers on Instagram. You get some perks when you get to 10,000 subscribers on Instagram, so that's kind of nice. And I'm to be giving away a bag. So this is the bag that I bought. It is a Love Your Melon bag. It is huge. It has an interior pocket, and it is made from recycled billboards. So this is kind of feels like old-fashioned wallpaper, vinyl, waterproof knit stitch fabric, and then I bought the wallet to go with it. And because they were having buy one get one free that day, I got a second one. So here's the wallet. So if I can reach my goal, and you can help me reach my goal, you can enter. Here's a second bag. By reposting on Instagram, posting, tagging people in my posts on Instagram, tagging people on YouTube, asking friends to follow, those kinds of things. I will open a thread on the Ravelry group where you can go over and just say what you did. Like, I reposted, I told a friend, I tagged you, I posted, I subscribed to your podcast. You should put that out there, even if you did it a long time ago. Whatever it is, you know, you can even just say, I get one entry every time you do something. But I'm thinking that there are probably 5 different ways that you can help me grow this community, and so you can have up to 5 entries. Let's do it that way. On Instagram, not Instagram, on Ravelry. Just go to the Ravelry group and join in the fun. Can you see the snowflakes? Yeah, that was distracting me. And that's the basketball hoop.